بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وفقهنا إذا جهلنا وزدنا علما نافعا وعملا متقبلا يا كريم وبعد. I want to start off before we start receiving questions and before we try our best to answer. Just with first a general point which I feel is I wanted to share, and then just a couple of questions that came from the last session. So this point I wanted to share came to the back of a class. So online we're doing classes with the great Imam of Ahl Sunnah, Imam Shaykh Husnain Yaqub al-Nottinghami, who I hope he's not here at the moment. But so we're reading from commentary of Bulugh al-Maram of Shaykh Nuruddin Itr Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, I'lam al-Anam. And in there he mentioned something which I thought really needs to be shared. We're reading a section on Salat al-Istisqa, the rain prayer, the prayer for seeking rain. Now let me just find what he mentioned. He was speaking about Aftakhar. I know, yeah. I'm gonna download a few of the backdrops as well. Don't worry, inshallah. I'm gonna get a Muhammad Salah on my right and Sadio Mane on the left, Raqib and Atid. Do you approve of that, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, actually, no, it wasn't Salat al-Istisqa. It was a section on solar eclipse. So one of the things that Shaykh Nuruddin Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, Shaykh Nuruddin Itr Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he mentioned was that we live in an age where eclipses and all other weather phenomena are worked out to a very precise detail. Like so you can have on your phone like the weather reports for any area that you want for the next week or beyond. And what's happened as a result of that is that human beings historically, like when there was change in weather conditions, there was an element of fear that entered into their hearts. And the Prophet ﷺ himself, he spoke about the eclipse prayer when he spoke, the sun and the moon eclipsing. يُخَوِّفُ اللَّهُ بِهِمَا عِبَادَهُ. يُخَوِّفُ اللَّهُ بِهِمَا عِبَادَهُ. That Allah subhanahu by the two of these solar and lunar eclipse, he puts fear into the hearts of their slaves. Now for us, it's just like we go out there and we just want to, like tourists watching some amazing phenomenon. The Prophet's nice and kind of yubadir ila salah, and he would rush into prayer out of fear of what was taking place. And that's something that we've lost. Like with the ilm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to humanity, we've lost something of our faith with that. Right? And that falls under وَظَنَّ أَهْلُهَا أَنَّهُمْ قَادِرُونَ عَلَيْهَا. One of the signs of Qiyamah, one of the signs of the Day of Judgment, as alluded to within the ayah in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about total destruction of the earth, there'll come a point where the people of the earth will believe that they have absolute control and mastery over the earth. And we're getting there. And so what Shaykh Nuruddin Hafidhahullah Ta'ala Itr, he mentions, the fact that we're able to predict, that human beings are able to predict, does not remove the divine element from this. We know when an eclipse is going to take place. That does not mean that there's an element of divine wrath behind that. We know, the thought came to my mind just to mention that because right now we're living through some of the strangest and weirdest times in terms of the weather. Like even right now, like the heat that we're in, like the nights that we're outside, like thunder at night time, it doesn't really bother us anymore. But something has been lost from our faith because something of our faith has been lost. So even though we're able to calculate it, even though we're able to predict it, it doesn't change the fact that when we're living through these type of changes in weather climates, it's a direct result of the wrath of Allah because of the acts of human beings. And we're just treating this as adi, as absolutely normal. We're just going on with our business as though nothing's happened. Like when we're living through times of unnatural heat, unnatural cold in the winter, like, there should be some real fear in our hearts. It's not just about how do we save the world from imminent destruction due to climate change. It's like, where are the people who are praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Where are the people who are shedding tears because of the acts of human beings that have brought this destruction and that have brought this destruction? So when we see what we're experiencing right now, it should put fear into our hearts, not because like perhaps in 20, 30 years we have no ice caps left in the North or South Pole, or because of like rising sea levels, or because of divine wrath that comes. And these are all signs of divine wrath. Wallahu. So often apologies to everybody who put like a somber mood on everything to start off with, but it was just a thought that I was traveling back from Bradford today, and it was just a thought like this weird weather. It's so strange and weird, yet we're not even flinching, we're not even thinking. And at the most, it'll just be some people who become like climate activists, but nobody's turning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a result of it. We're just treating it as absolute normal.
And some of the nations that were destroyed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they saw the adhab coming, they saw it as weather coming, and they were celebrating, like, oh, this is so cool, right? And and it was really the thing that ended. I mean, is this the kind of, when we're told that as human beings not to upset the balance? I mean, we've clearly upset the balance of nature.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing the unsettled weather conditions and climate changes. I'm not quite sure if there is a solution to kind of stabilizing it.
Stabilize, Wallahu. And its solution for stabilizing first and foremost begins by recognizing it's not just like the technology that human beings have produced that have damaged the earth. It's a state of rebellion against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the ultimate damage that's created all of this. Wallahu a'lam. And then before moving on to the questions, apologies, Doctor. I just wanted to follow up on a couple of questions that came last week, which I sent on to a couple of teachers, and one I remember we discussed, and afterwards about weeds on graves, should they be removed or not? I sent that question to one of our Shaykh Salih Murabi', and he was of the view that there's no need to do so, because the Prophet ﷺ, when he spoke about everything that grows, like planting a twig, yusabbih, it does tasbih. And the fuqaha, they mention that anything that has life within it, that grows, it does tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here there's a point to think about that. Like for us, we would probably think just get rid of it because it's unsightly, it's ungaining, it's weeds that are growing out of there. We're perfectly happy to put the most beautiful decorations on there, flowers and everything else on there, which don't really serve a purpose for the deceased. But weeds that what the Shaykh was saying, yusabbih Allah, that why wouldn't they glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So Allahu a'lam, that's what the answer that came back is, that weeds do glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's no reason for it not to be removed. Or there's no reason for it to be removed. It should stay as it is. Wallahu a'lam. So Dr. Saab, so perhaps the weeds, keep the weeds growing in there, but no smoking. No smoking of weed. Somebody asked me a question recently, like, is it actually halal to smoke weed? I kind of thought there was a generation not so long ago where that was kind of understood that it's haram.
Yeah.
So
but now we're getting questions about all sorts of things these days that maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we wouldn't even have dreamt that this is where the discussion would be.
Yeah. Let me add the second point, because this I think will be interest you and one or two others. I thought it was a very interesting question that came last week about Does the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam intercede on behalf of deviants? Does the Prophet, let me just share. Yeah. So I sent that again. I sent that question to one of my shuyukh, Shaykh Muhammad Khalaf. He's a student of Shaykh Samar al-Nas. He's a scholar in his own right. He's actually a Syrian scholar based in Medina at the moment. And his interest his answer was interesting. At first, because quite often I'll send Shaykh Muhammad Khalaf quite a few questions. Normally you send back a brief answer. This one was a lengthy answer. Now, his first answer was, we're talking here about deviants who are not out of the fold of Islam. These are Ahl al-Qibla, they're not Ahl al-Kufr. These are people within the boundaries of Islam, like the Mu'tazila, like some of the Shia, the Khawarij. So first, he was saying that we cannot clearly say that they will be deprived of intercession, because we cannot say, at the same time, we cannot say that, or we don't say that they're eternally in hellfire. Although deviancy in Aqeedah is worse than sin, it's the worst type of sin. But to say categorically that they're denied of intercession, so his first answer is, so we can't say that. Then he sends a message a minute later, and then he just starts going at them. A proper standard Sunni answer. He says, those Shia and those Khawarij, he said, they denied the intercession of the Prophet. Why would they receive his intercession? So then he switched mood. And because like the Mu'tazila in particular, not the Shia, the Mu'tazila rejected the concept of Shafa'at al-Nabi. They reject the concept of intercession of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, and in some books of Aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah, Imam al-Sawi, for example, in his commentary on Jawharat al-Tawheed, he mentions a point about drinking from the pool of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like again, the Mu'tazila, they rejected that. They denied that. So he says they're the first ones who be turned away from that. Because they've denied it, they're not worthy of drinking from the pool of the Prophet. So
what's the basis on which they deny that, though?
I think, wallahu alam, that they deny it on the basis that the athar are not, they're not qat'i, the reports, they're not, although they are qat'i, and they're mutawatir. But
you see, I've always got confused about this aspect of rejecting something because it's not, say, mutawatir, it's khabar ahad, or because I think punishment in the grave as well. They I mean, it's one thing saying we can't definitively say that there is X, Y, and Z happening, but to the point of denial, just because it doesn't meet a standard.
So generally with the Mu'tazila, because these things don't match up with our experiences in this world, they do ta'weel. They interpret it. So they're more based on, like, they're saying rationally these things are not possible, so it must mean something else. So the descriptions of the hawd of the prophets, the sun being a mile overhead, a lot of the issues on Day of Judgment, they don't accept it. So Allahu Akbar, and Shaykh Muhammad Khalaf, like, mashallah, a proper Sunni answer, he says they don't deserve any of the intercession of the Prophet. But then at the end he came back and says, but theologically, can we categorically say no? And he was being a bit careful on that. Allah.
Shouldn't we want them all to receive intercession at the end of the day?
And that's his point. That's his point, that in the end, like, we can, unless we have something definitive, we cannot definitively say yes or no about this. Allah.
Let's get some questions in. Let's start off with the easy one. 2 sunnahs before Dhuhr as opposed to 4 sunnahs. Is that a thing?
2 sunnahs before Dhuhr is not a thing within the Hanafi madhab, no. Most of the ahadith that speak about the sunnahs before Dhuhr, they mention 4 sunnah. There is 1 or 2 narrations that mention 2, and that's a sunnah with Imam Shafi'i and I think also Imam Malik. With the Hanafis, no. The sunnah before Dhuhr is only 4, and if you did 2, it will count as 2 nafil, but it also means that you've not done your 4 sunnah mu'akkada. But let me ask you something, Javed. I'm going to throw you a question. Let me put you on the spot. What's the hukum of not praying 4 sunnah before dhuhr regularly? 4 sunnah before dhuhr.
It's sinful because it's sunnah mu'akkada. So it's sunnah mu'akkada here and there. If it's left is one thing, but if it becomes a regular habit, then it's sinful.
There are narrations that are mentioned in the Hanafi books, hadith, which in reality are not. Like the muhaddithin, they reject it as being authentic. Even weak, they say the mawdu'at. Man tarak al-arba' qabla al-dhuhr lam tananhu shafa'ati. Those who do not pray the 4 before dhuhr, they will not receive my intercession. But the truth is that they're mawdu'at, that they're falsified reports, because there are reports from the prophets, and I mentioned 2 before.
But
So
even as sunnah mu'akkada, I mean, we know that 2 sunnah before fajr is not quite the same as the sunnah mu'akkada in terms of importance.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't even drop that when we're traveling.
That's right. On one view, yeah.
But on one view.
Oh yeah, no. There's a number of views on the sunnahs. One view says that, I think Shams al-Hulwani says that as a traveler you don't drop the 2 sunnahs of Fajr and the 2 sunnahs of Maghrib.
Right. Okay.
One view says no, you don't drop the 2 sunnahs, but the general view is that even the sunnahs of Fajr can be dropped as a traveler.
Oh, right. Okay.
What you mentioned is one view in the madhab.
Yeah, but I was taught that the 4 sunnahs before dhuhr, after the 2 sunnahs before fajr, are like more important, if I can, and more significant than say the other sunnah mu'akkadas.
Yeah. Allahu Akbar.
But I was also told that you can't pray them sitting down, like other sunnahs.
Which ones?
Fajr.
In al-Lubab, Imam al-Maydani, he mentions that there is a narration from the Imam that says you cannot pray the 2 sunnahs of Fajr sitting down. But he says that's on the original narration of the Imam, that those 2 sunnahs are wajib.
Right, okay.
The original view of the Imam is that they're not sunnahs, they're wajib. On that narration, you can't pray them sitting down. But on the general narration, you can pray them sitting down. Allahu Akbar.
We've got a really important question on Quran. There's a few parts to this, so maybe we can get through this before Maghrib.
We'll do this one and then come back here.
Yeah. It's about Quran being uncreated speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first part of it is it right to refer to Quran as a speech of Allah?
In fact, read them all out because they are interconnected.
Yeah. So is it right to refer to the Quran as a speech of Allah? This is from, I don't know how to pronounce the name, Gonzalez.
He's my mate from, he lives in Rawdah in Saudi. He lives in Rawdah.
Yeah.
Rawdah, the Miqat.
Yeah, we've been there, mashallah. So Michio Gonzalez is asking this question. Is it right to refer to Quran as a speech of Allah? And is the Quran and the Mus'haf the same thing? That was a good question. Are the Quranic verses, chapters that we see and read in the Mus'haf created or uncreated? And are the Quranic verses and chapters that enter the heart of the Prophet created or uncreated? Can the Quran Mus'haf be distinguished in what is created and uncreated? If so, what aspects are they?
Okay, Dr. Javed, I'm going to ask you now because, mashallah, I know you know a fair amount. Can you just summarize the key distinction or the key discussion about the Quran being the speech of Allah? What's the key point?
The key point is that the speech of Allah is because it's part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it has to be uncreated. It can't be uncreated because of that. And I think that's what the Mu'tazilites differ on. The Quran, as in the Mus'haf, on the other hand, is something slightly different, which is, I think, what he's alluding to.
Yeah.
I've not said anything that's taken me out of the religion, have I?
Not so far. Probably stop at that point just to make sure. But that's the key point there. There's a distinction between the attributes of divine speech and the created revelation. So the attributes is considered to be meanings. Al-ma'ani al-qa'ima bi-dhatillah, the meanings behind the words. That's eternal, that's uncreated. Then Allah SWT reveals those meanings in a created form that's made up of words, that's in the book, that's in the recital. Distinguish between the two. We can refer to, so in the first one, can't refer to the Quran as speech of Allah. Allah SWT does in the Quran, حتى يسمع كلام الله. Let the unbeliever come and spend time in the Muslims so they can hear kalam Allah, the words of Allah. That's not referring to the eternal attribute, that's referring to the recited. Is the Quran and the Mus'haf the same thing? We're talking about the created words, yes it is. The writing, yes it is the same thing. But the verses, the chapters, the words that are in the Mus'haf, in the copy, they're created, they had a beginning, they had an end. But the meanings that they represent, they're eternal. They're eternal. So we must make a distinction between the eternal attributes of speech, which is meanings, and the revealed words that we recite and are written, which are created. Allahu Akbar. So even we're going to pause now because it's Maghrib. We're going to pause for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then inshallah ta'ala we'll continue. Just before we carry on, just something came to mind and I thought I'll mention it here. Although we have mentioned this before. And I don't know, I'll mention a name here. One of your favorites, Javed, Imran Hussein. Yeah, the eschatologist. So I don't know, somebody shared a link, and Allahu A'lam, it's meant to be from his official page, whether it's Facebook or Instagram page. And even those official pages, you don't know how official they are. But on there, it's claimed that wearing face masks and going to pray with them and also having separations are bid'ah, and nobody should pray in the mosques that do that. So a complete condemnation of praying in mosques that have spacings between, because it contradicts the sunnah of the Prophet, and also covering the face contradicts the sunnah of the Prophet. So we have discussed this in this session before, that yes, the sunnah is that you stand with shoulders touching shoulders, and yes, the sunnah is that your face is uncovered. But here there is a reason as to why it's taken place. So the idea that it's better to pray at home rather than pray in such a situation, if a person was to argue that you just feel a bit safer not praying because there is still a potential spread of virus, that's fair enough.
Isn't there precedence about given certain circumstances, certain elements of prayer change? I mean, even more radically than that, like if you fear danger coming towards you, that you can change you can face towards the danger so you can see it rather than the actual qibla. Yeah, is that accurate?
As you were mentioning that, like, even more of an example of that is the war prayer.
Yeah, so, the war prayer. That was the original. I thought that came to my head. Then I thought you might ask me to explain how that works, and then I didn't mention it. So I didn't bother.
Oh, sure. No, but that's the best example there. There you're praying it differently. Like the whole prayer, and that's in the Quran, the ayah of Salatul Khawf, of how you pray in times of war. Very different Jama'ah prayer to normal. So yeah, I mean, again, that's an excellent example. Dr. Saab, that's why we got you on here. To throw your little gems on.
All right. We got some toilet and dua questions. So
that's the standard one, right?
Yeah. So you know what the question is? Yeah, I don't need to read it out to you. Yeah. Can you, when you make wudu, can you make the du'as? Because obviously the toilet is in the same room. That's the concern that people have.
the fatwa that I was given by my teachers is that as long as you're not reading du'as at the toilet, on the toilet itself, then, and it's away from the toilet area, like where you've got like a wash basin, a shower area and so on, then you're allowed. Some of our shuyukh, they said that you put the toilet lid down and then you're okay to do it. But in a small cubicle where there's only a toilet, pretty much only toilet and a little sink there, no, you shouldn't read it in there. Allah.
Toilets are weird. I mean, this is like a recent phenomenon, and we're all guilty. But I mean, up until relatively recently, nobody, west or east, used to have it in the house. And now it's like the most beautified room in the house. It's like people spend thousands on their toilet, right? And it's like people want to spend a long time in there. Like,
I don't know if you remember. I don't know if your memory goes far back enough, but I remember when I was young, and my young is not as young as you. So like this is like talking about the 1980s. Like old houses back then. So this is pre-World War I houses.
Yeah, privy. They had a privy.
No, I wasn't thinking. I was thinking the outside toilet.
Yeah, that's a privy.
Okay, there you go.
A little shed, up the back of the garden.
But that was normal. Like you don't bring devils into your house, because that's what a toilet in your house is. That's in al-hushush muhtadara. The Prophet said the place where you relieve yourself, there's presence there. There's devils that come there. We've just brought them into our houses for the sake of.
I'll tell you a funny story, with your permission. We were traveling in Canada, and Dean was with us. There's a whole group of us, and we were lost or somewhere in Toronto, and one brother had to stop off to relieve himself. So we stopped the car and he walked off near a large lake, and there were some rocks there, and he walked off there, and he did something, and one gentleman came, started speaking to him, and he quickly rushed back, and he goes, the man asked him what he was doing, so he had to explain, and he goes, "This is my garden." he just walked into a chap's garden and relieved himself, not unknowingly. It was
quality. Anyway, let's carry on.
Okay. Putting our hand on our head when we read the final verses of Surah Hashar. This is from Anas Ahmed.
Yeah, see, that's a practice of the Haba'ib. You put your hands low, أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل. It is said that there's a musalsal narration. For those who are not aware, in hadith, you have hadith musalsal, which is a practice that's transmitted through the chain. So that the Prophet did that, and then the Sahabi, when he narrated the hadith, he did the same, and that's called a musalsal narration. It is said that there's a musalsal narration from the Prophet that he did that. Allahu A'lam. No.
There was one, I saw one question about speaking about prehistoric times. Do you believe that there was a time with dinosaurs? What have the teacher said about that?
Jaiz aqlan. Possible. It's possible. There's no clear nas within the Quran and the Sunnah. There's no clear text in the Quran and Sunnah that speaks explicitly about dinosaurs. I remember, and again, this is for many of you, it's another generation, but me and Java from another generation. Back in the 80s and 90s, a book that was massive, everybody was the Quran, Bible, and Science by Dr. Morris
Bukai.
Bukai, yeah. So in there, and some of the things that he said were a bit far-fetched. He was doing his own tafsir of the Quran, trying to find everything scientific in the Quran, which is a dangerous thing to do. But one of the things, there's an ayah, I forget the ayat that he referenced, but he took one or two ayat as a basis for a creation coming after creation. So he took that as a possibility, speaking about dinosaurs, even though it doesn't. It just speaks about creation coming after the creation.
Mm.
Say from there that you got dinosaurs is really pushing it. It's similar. And Jav, I'll ask you: does the Quran speak about alien life?
It speaks about creation that we don't know anything about.
Well, life on other planets. Life on other planets.
I'm not aware of anything, while there anything really explicit.
Yeah. Well, what about the 7 Earths that are spoken of in the Quran?
Yeah, I don't.
My point on that is that there are things that could be drawn out, but there's nothing that's on these. If somebody comes in, because dinosaurs, the fossils, it seems pretty clear that it is there. And the idea of like human history being only like 6,000 years and so on is not necessarily Quranic. More biblical, that is.
Yeah.
So that like Shaykh Al-Akbar Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, he spoke about aeons of human of the earth itself.
Yeah.
But the idea of 4.5 billion years for Earth, that doesn't go against anything in the Quran.
Yeah.
So we can accept it. We can accept the idea of dinosaurs. There's nothing.
One thing that people do bring out and people have a problem with, and I think this leads them down, confusion with evolution, are like cavemen, I guess, or Cro-Magnon is, I think, one term. They're like a souped-up caveman, right? So you have, people bringing out fossil records of them and who are they, what are they. So what have the Shaykh said about that?
What exactly being your point? The evolution of man.
People are suggesting that, obviously people who believe in evolution are suggesting that we evolved from these modern human types. Other people are saying that these are not Banu Adam, but they're separate creation that have intermingled with humans, and humans have bred with them.
Wallahu, and I think the definitive point on this is that the Quran has qat'i, is absolutely clear that there's a direct creation of a human being. The direct creation of a human being, Adam alayhi salam, alladhi khalaqtu biyadayya, the one that I created directly. So even though there may be other creation that is similar to human beings, we would have to then understand that as being branches from the first human being, rather than being distinct humans who are of a completely different nature.
Anonymous is asking, who's going to win Champions League this year? Do we care? Is it important this year?
Not anymore, but I'm thinking more Bayern now. City actually Bayern or City. Barcelona look to be finished. Barcelona have gone.
Hijab questions. This is a really increasingly comes around this question about what the evidence is for women wearing hijab. Because people are suggesting nowadays that was really more for that time and it's not required anymore. And can we just include in that Satr as well, like the parts? Because I know even back in the 90s, the Sheikh, what's his name now?
Which one?
Sheikh Al-Azhar. One of them.
Jadallah. Which one is?
Begins with a ta.
Tantawi.
Yeah. Tantawi. I mean, he said, knee-length skirts are fine, because these days that's considered modest. So what's the evidences for covering, wearing hijab specifically?
I think the issue there is about that it's only for women at that time. The evidence first in the Quran speaks about yudnina alayhinna min jalabibihin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about covering with their jilbab, covering themselves, like covering their bodies. Also speaks about not exposing anything illa ma dhahara minha, except for those things that are apparent, which face and the hands. So you have two ayahs, one in Surah An-Nur and one in Surah Al-Ahzab, that speak about women covering. The Prophet ﷺ, then he spoke that you have a number of ahadith that speak about covering the women covering themselves except for the face and except for the hands. Perhaps one of the key evidences, because even those evidences can be argued saying, but the Quran doesn't explicitly state that, nor does the Hadith explicitly, even though it does, but some can argue that. One that should not be downplayed as an evidence is ijma'. Ijma', unanimous consensus, is considered one of the most powerful proofs that there is. Like, we're living in an age where religion is being so simplified that it's just Quran, Sunnah, and that's it. Like, taking away all of the other sources of evidences. Ijma' qat'i, like when you have absolute unanimous agreements on a matter, like where from the very beginning it's transmitted in large numbers, that there's an agreement on that. That's the case with hijab. Like, you've never had, up until recent times, any scholar of weight who says that it's acceptable for a woman to uncover her hair, or that's not considered part of her nakedness. So even if, like you mentioned, like Tantawi, Shaykh al-Azhar is saying that, and kalamu mardud, his words are rejected. His words have no weight whatsoever. It doesn't matter. Even in these times, if Shaykh al-Azhar is still a rank. If Shaykh al-Azhar is saying something like that, then with all due respect to that rank, khariq al-ijma' is going against it. So the issue here is not so much what's the dalil for it, because the evidence is absolute. It's the claim that it was only for women in that time.
I mean, we only take our Sharia, obviously, from the Prophet ﷺ and what he brought, but there are certain things that from time immemorial were the case, right? And like, for instance, eating pork. I mean, that was never allowed for anyone that I can, in terms of at least the Christians and the Jews.
Yeah.
It was never permissible for them. Or whereas alcohol was permissible for them.
It was, yeah.
Right?
It was permissible.
Praying towards a qibla was a thing, even with the Christians at one time. But covering the hair is another one. Covering the hair, ghusl after your monthly cycle, right? Certain things, carry on, from the, they're present in previous and covering the hair is one of them. And it seems strange now to say that suddenly it doesn't apply.
I think you're absolutely spot on, but I also just want to pick up on what the sister just followed up with. And I think that's more the issue. Up to the point of which hijab, people saying the Maulvi told us and people not accepting it. There's a danger in that. Because not accepting something like hijab it becomes a question mark about a person's iman. Like, there are certain things, if rejected, if somebody now comes and says, the Maulvi's told me that I've got to pray 5 times a day, and I'm not accepting what he says. There's no question marks about that person's faith. And hijab is of a similar level. Hijab is not something that's open to debate, because the evidences are categorical for it. So people are not accepting it because of the times that they're in. Just on that point as well, I was saying it was given to women in that time alone. That itself needs an evidence. If somebody's claiming that it was only for women at that time, what's your proof for that? What's your proof that you're claiming that? That's that dalil al-takhsis. Like, now you're playing around with Quran and Sunnah and claiming something of that nature is only for that time, when the Quran and Sunnah is universal. The Quran and Sunnah works the opposite. Quran and Sunnah is for all times, unless there's an evidence to prove otherwise. So to make that claim, it goes completely against the nature of revelation. So whoever's saying hijab is for that time alone, hatu burhanakum in kuntum sadiqeen. Bring your proof if you are truthful. Wallahu a'lam.
Prayer question. When you tashahhud and after the shahada you say sallallahu alayhi wasallam, does it require prostration of forgetfulness?
A person, what's Imran? Imran saying a person in the tashahhud and after the shahada he says sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Hold on, what's Imran? What's that? After the shahada he says sallallahu alayhi wasallam.
Yeah, so you say ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam.
Is that what he means?
Yeah.
وأشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. If he said that, if it's in the final sitting, it wouldn't be. It's not from the Sunnah to do that, because as soon as you finish وأن محمد عبده ورسوله, you say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad anyway. That's from the Sunnah. So you're adding into the tashahhud, and you're actually not allowed to add into the tashahhud. Like the Hanif say. In the Salah Ibrahimiyya, the Durood Sharif, you're allowed to say, and it's good to say Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, to add with Sayyidina, but said you're not allowed to do that in the tashahhud. You should not say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Sayyidina Muhammadin, because they said tashahhud should be left as it was, unchanged. So then to add sallallahu alayhi wasallam is a problem. But if it's done in the first sitting, then it would require, well, Sajda Sahud is if you do something forgetfully, this is intentional. Because what?
No, but sometimes someone might be used to saying it; it just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, if that's the case, then yeah, because you've delayed the standing and you require wajib to stand straight away. If you do it in the final sitting, then no, it wouldn't require sajda. Allahu a'lam. Mm-hmm.
Nav wants you to take your background off.
Depends who this Nav is.
Yeah.
Nav, mashallah. Although the background that Jawad, mashallah, mashallah alayk. I should change it to that, Medina.
Well, someone's accusing me somewhere of being a UAE supporter. I'll come back to that person later.
What's a UAE supporter?
Of the regime. Yeah. It's begun. It's begun. They'll find me on
Hold on.
In Shaykh's.
Do I need to distance myself from you?
Yeah. We'll be on in Shaykh's clothing in no time.
Okay.
Okay. There's another prayer question about missing surahs, the smaller surahs. Is it true that you can't skip a surah? And is that the case in all the madhabs?
For the Hanafis, if it's a fard prayer, then you should not miss out one surah, one short surah in the fard prayer. You can have a gap of more than one. So, where it says Surah Al-Nasr, then you have to recite Surah Al-Falaq. No, because Surah Al-Nasr, and then you have Tabbat Yada, and then you have Qul Huwallahu Ahad. So if you're missing out one, إذا جاء نصر الله, and the second Qul Huwallahu Ahad, yes, the Hanafis consider it makruh. So you can go two or more. No, actually, yeah, you're right. So قل أعوذ برب الفلق or قل أعوذ برب الناس. So it is makruh the Hanafis. So you don't have to just recite Surah Falaq, two or more after. And it's only the Hanafis who state that. Other madhab, they're okay with that, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, can we kind of give an idea of what a short surah is for those people who might be?
The surah towards the back end of the Quran. Usually we're looking at from Surah Al-Bayyinah towards the end of the Quran. Because when in the Sunnah it mentions that the Prophet in Maghrib read the short surahs, the Sunnah of the Prophet short surahs, they mention from Surah Al-Bayyinah, لَمْ يَكُنُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, to the end of the Quran. Allah.
Yeah. Okay. How do you know you're affected by black magic?
That question's off the back, I'm assuming, the back of the tafsir class we just done. It's on Surah Al-Falaq. And in there, من شر النفاثات في العقد. What we mentioned in that class is that you shouldn't assume as a default that any problem going on in your life it's down to black magic. Don't assume the worst. It may well be. We don't reject it. We don't deny it. It's haqq. It's real. Because the Quran speaks about it. وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. They cannot harm anybody except by the permission of Allah. So black magic is real. But not go to the extreme that exists in some cultures where whatever problem occurs in your life, it's all down to black magic. It's all down to Ayn, the evil eye, which are both real. So what was advised in class there, just go and see a doctor. Go to a medical doctor. There may well just be normal medical conditions that a person being affected by.
Is it a thing though where, I mean, we have when we were studying, we were being taught that if someone has a long-standing physical illness, obviously it can give them some psychological, it can affect their mental health. Similarly, people with a long-standing issues with mental health, it can affect their physical well-being. But isn't that the case, say, for instance, someone who's maybe affected, physically or mentally, that they may be more susceptible to issues with jinn? I'm moving away from magic a little bit. And vice versa. Jinn problems can affect your physical health. Yeah,
but the only thing is just to be careful, because people just jump to
it, yeah.
That's the only thing, but definitely. So how do you know? First of all, just tick off the boxes and just check whether you've got any obvious medical conditions. If not, then go to a raqi, but somebody who's trustworthy, somebody who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not just someone who's making a business out of just trying to clean people of money. I've seen something on Facebook, some guy in Birmingham who's allegedly like just stealing money from people because of which is such a common thing in that world of ruqya.
Oh, it's big business. It's big business, and everyone's at it.
And part of the reason why it's such a big business is because people are so gullible.
Not getting married is like a classic one. People think, there's some black magic because my, relative hasn't got married. And I know one Molana who was offering £10,000 to remove the black magic. I mean, to me, that immediately, says, forget, the guy is crooked.
I'll tell you one thing on that. Our teacher, Shaykh Haroon, because he deals with black magic. And one thing he said, anybody who says that we'll get rid of black magic is lying. He said, because you never totally get rid of it. He said, there will always be something that remains. So he himself deals with it. He writes ta'weed and he gives treatment for it. But he says to say that you get rid of the traces of it completely, says it doesn't happen. Allah.
Women, do they have to cover their hair when they're doing wudu?
No, they're not.
I like this one. Is there such a thing as mermaids? Admi al-Bahr.
What's it called in Arabic? What are you called?
Admi al-Bahr.
Adami al-Bahr.
Yeah.
Okay, Adami.
Imam Shafi says you can eat them. I'm sure. Yeah. Well, actually, let me take that back. Can I just take that back? I can't remember whether it was him, but I heard that one person said that even if they come out of the sea speaking the purest Arabic language, that you can eat them. I'm sure it is Imam Shafi, but I'll take that back.
I'm sure it was Shaykh Ibrahim.
Yeah, maybe.
Let's skip that because I think I know who's asking that question. So my question to that person, are you allowed to eat mermaids? First, are you allowed to marry them or not?
They're not asking about eating mermaids. They're just asking, do they exist?
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I brought in the food element.
If they exist, can you marry a mermaid or not?
It's a bit fishy, that.
Boom. I just got onto that. Are you allowed to marry a jinn?
No.
Okay, go on. Anyway, carry on. Let's carry on with this. Let's go.
Yeah. Some brother's disappointed now.
Hold on, where are you going? I'm looking at these questions. I can't find what you...
Okay.
makruh to eat a man, therefore makruh to marry.
Here's again another anonymous question: are you questionable for your thoughts in front of Allah?
Yeah. There are different types of thoughts. Like some of the ulama mention 5 different types. Ibn Nujaym, he mentions 5 different types of thoughts. But perhaps the main 2 to look at, one is called al-azima, al-azm, and one is called khawatir. Khawatir is just a fleeting thought that came in your mind, appeared from nowhere, seemingly from nowhere. That a person is not held accountable for, even if it happens to be kufr. If it just came and just went, just because you said A'udhu Billah, then you're not held accountable for that. Whereas if you yourself create a thought in your mind, even kufr, a person falls into kufr for that. Allahu A'lam.
Okay. Burhan's asking for a friend. If a person misses Isha, Fard in congregation, can he join the congregation for Taraweeh?
Where's this Burhan guy? Burhan, ask Burhan what's he studying these days? Don't know what he's doing anymore. Where's his question gone? Is it at the top?
No, it's towards the bottom.
I don't even see most of these questions anymore. If Burhan is still a Hanafi, then no, he can't. Hanafis cannot pray Fard behind somebody's praying Sunnah. Fard or Isha cannot be prayed behind Sunnah. Let's see what this question is.
No, I think he's asking something different. If I'm not mistaken, he's asking they missed the Fard with the Jama'at, so he's prayed his Fard by himself, and then he's joining them for Taraweeh. He's asking for a friend. He's asking for a...
you set him up, haven't you?
No, I had no conversation with him. It's got nothing to do with me, but...
If you've not prayed your Fard in Jama'ah, whether that Jama'ah in the Masjid for Taraweeh or any Jama'ah, and he said you cannot pray witr in that Jama'ah. The witr is explicitly mentioned.
Okay.
Well, for you, on your behalf, I remember we mentioned that in class. I need to go back and check where I made that statement about Taraweeh from. Allah, but definitely witr. They mentioned that explicitly. Allah.
What's the evidence for Isa Islam coming down? The descent of Isa Islam.
There's ayah of the Quran that alludes to a couple of ayahs. It's not clear in the Quran. A hadith which is shibh mutawatir, which is virtually mutawatir. So the ayah in the Quran that indicates وَإِنَّهُ لَعِلْمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ, that truly he is a sign of the Day of Judgment. That's interpreted. It's not clear. It's interpreted as being a reference to that. There's also an interpretation that comes وَإِن مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا لَيُؤْمِنَنَّ بِهِ قَبْلَ مَوْتِهِ, that every single one from the people of the book must believe in him before he passes away, before he dies. Before he dies meaning the second coming. So those are interpretation. But there are many ahadith, and there are some who wrote works on this. One of the Ghumari muhaddithin from Sham, from Morocco, he wrote a whole work listing the ahadith that are mutawatir. And that's why, at the least, if not more, at the least, to reject that falls into deviancy. At the least, it falls into deviancy. Allah.
Mitchell's asking us...
And when we say at the least, it means beyond deviancy is kufr. Beyond deviancy is kufr. Fadlan, yeah.
Mitchell's asking us, because we both support Liverpool, what awrah do we make around Man United fans? Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubathi wal-khaba'ith.
No. That's also the word when you enter into Manchester as a city. Yeah. And when you leave, you say Ghufranak.
Is it true at Maghrib time you have to cover food?
Yeah, it's mentioned some reports that not just Maghrib time, throughout the night that you don't leave food exposed, because there's one night of the year when Bala descends, where misfortune descends, and it affects anything that's open, food or water, or can containers. Yeah.
We've got a topical question. At the moment, a lot of mosques have restrictions, and if there's a restriction about only certain age people can attend Jum'ah, is it safer just to pray Dhuhr
Yeah.
after reading the Jum'ah?
Yeah. See, that is a concern. So definitely it's safer just to pray Dhuhr.
All right.
So for the Hanafis, there's still that concern because people are being excluded, even though there's a reason people are still being excluded from the Jum'ah. For the other madhahib, exclusion doesn't invalidate. Like, isn't making it accessible to all or not making it accessible to all does not invalidate. So inshallah, it's inshallah.
Worries and concerns. Can you maybe share some good adhkar to read?
Yeah. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين وكذلك ننجي المؤمنين. Same way you will remove stress and worry from the believers. So read that a lot. In some hadith it mentions to read it 100 times. So that's the famous dua of Sayyidina Yunus alayhi salam. So read that. كثرة الصلاة على النبي. Read as much prayers on the Prophet as possible. وَيُكْفَى هَمُّكَ, the Prophet said, and your concerns will be taken care of. Read a lot of Quran as well. Just immerse yourself in the Quran and read the dua of the Quran. اللهم إني أسألك بكل اسم سميت به نفسك وأنزلته في كتابك. So read to the end. أن تجعل القرآن ربيع قلبي وجلاء حزني. Part of the dua that the Prophet taught us when reading the Quran is I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the Quran as jala'a huzni, as a remover of my stress and worry. So there's a lot to read. There's a lot that can be read.
There's a good translation of Kitab al-Adhkar that Sidi Muhammad Isa's translated. It has du'as for lots of various things, for people who want...
Sorry, this is brilliant. Apologies for interrupting. Anas has shared the ruling on eating mermaids. Absolutely brilliant.
Where is it? Right, okay.
Hanafi's two opinions, haram/halal if ritually slaughtered. Al-Badaya, Malik is permissible even if you boil them. Shafi is permissible. Hanbali's halal if ritually slaughtered. Later bin Sa'd permissible. Thawri two opinions, haram/halal. Jazakallah khairan, Anas, mashallah. He's done some great research.
Has he just asked a question that you knew the answers to?
No, somebody else asked that, I think. That's
right, okay.
But what we're asking is, do they even exist?
When we're going around to answers for dinner?
Who's answer? You're jumping around. Who's answer?
No, not Anas. He's giving us this the rulings.
He's going to feed us mermaid soup. Allahu Akbar.
Okay, this is a good question. Does it? This is from Yusuf. Does it make my prayer invalid if I smile at my child during prayer?
No. And Allahu Akbar. It's difficult to say ijma' consensus, but Allahu Akbar, especially across the four madhabs, nobody says that smiling invalidates the prayer.
I think maybe is a concern that the child is outside of the prayer and they're responding to that.
Even with that.
Yeah.
Even that, no. Burhan, I'll exercise you because you need some. Does Fadila to Shaykh carry out exercism in his spare time?
Sorry, can I just? This one's been asked a while ago about women doing adhan. What's the ruling on women calling the adhan?
Women calling the adhan for the Hanafis is considered makruh because it involves raising the voice. So genuine situation, and usually adhan is about raising the voice, so therefore it's makruh. Sayyidina Imam Shafi'i allows it, but with the Hanafis it's makruh. I think we discussed this last time about reading adhan in the ear of a child, newborn child, if for some reason that the father can't be present or another male can't be present. because the voice is not being raised, then it would be permissible in that case. Allahu A'lam. As a general reason, no.
Anonymous is asking about jealous feelings. How do we handle jealousy when if you're jealous over someone or something?
Change it into ghibta. Ghibta is good jealousy. Jealousy that's evil. وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ. The jealousy that's evil that you take protection from is jealousy where you see somebody having something and it's not like you want it, just you don't want that person to have it. That's an evil state of the heart. And that's a reflection of your dissatisfaction with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah has willed for that person to have that. So you should look into yourself and think about how do you view how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has distributed wealth, knowledge, whatever. So it's more about you. It's not about that person. It's more about you. But instead, if you use it, particularly in religious matters, use it as a way, a rivalry to compete with others. That you see that person got more knowledge, so I want more knowledge. Not that I don't want him to have it. Like that person's generous and I want to have the generosity. So try and change it into good jealousy. But if it's that evil type, where ultimately it means that you're not content with the decree of Allah. اللهم ما أصبح بي من نعمة أو بأحد من خلقك فمنك وحدك لا شريك لك. Read that word of the dhikr of the Prophet in the morning. Read that a lot. Oh Allah, whatever blessings that comes from you in the morning or for any of the creation of God is from you alone. Just keep on repeating that, inshallah ta'ala, and then that will remove something from within you.
Okay, this is like a serious question, and it's a problem, I think, because of the nature of our setup these days.
Yeah.
It was kind of controversial in the 80s for to see a woman speak on stage, and now things are much more relaxed. So one of the questions here is about when we're having classes which are presumably mixed, and I suppose this is, Islamic classes, but it could be any kind of class, about a husband talking to a wife's friends on the basis that, well, we're in the same class, right? So, chatting to them and chatting about them, and obviously you can understand the wife's position, not wanting them to be, having a, chit chat with her pals.
Yeah.
I mean, what is the situation with that? And, can she tell him, that this is wrong, or, what's the best way to handle it, and what's the hukum?
First, just as a general point for all of those who are attending these sessions, which is that when it becomes a personal, private matter, as an adab, it's not good that you reveal it in front of everybody. Because I've seen one or 2 points in there, which is, if it was from an anonymous sender, that's one thing. Like when it says that I told them that I would go to my parents, that's a family issue there now. So just as a general thing, if anybody has like very private matters, a public forum like this is not the best place to discuss it. That as a general question is a valid question. And then also answering that type of question, I'm very cautious about answering it, because you need to know more of what's going on in that relationship. So as a general thing, just generally chatting with each other and just having, I'm just saying that the classmates and so on. No, there are etiquettes that need to be maintained, because it's a religious setting. It's not like at university we do this, at college we did this, at school we did this. This is Deen. This is religion, so people should be a lot more careful in terms of maintaining boundaries. So even though because of where people are now, so it's become normal that you have mixed classes, it's far from ideal. It's not the way it is. It's not the way it's meant to be. And even though we have it in our classes, but still it's far from ideal. But then now start saying just the way that we have classes in school and college and university, that's not what these models ultimately about connecting us back to the Prophet. It's not connecting us back to university. It's connected us back to the Prophet, and that's a standard. So when people are dealing with other students in class and so on, that's a standard that should be looked at. So respect, maintain respect, because it's religious sciences that you're learning. And so that type of behavior shouldn't be the norm. It shouldn't be the norm. That's not how it should be. Wallahu a'lam. But still, in terms of the husband and wife situation, there's something more to that. So Allah. So I don't really want to get more into that. And if the sister wants to speak more about that, then we're welcome to talk about it. So send a message and contact us. Then we can discuss it if you want to. But other than that, yeah, that type of behavior is not appropriate in classes of knowledge. Allahu
a'lam. In pregnancy, so the latter stages, if someone's finding it difficult getting up and down, can they sit down for some rakat?
Yeah, a woman who's pregnant and becomes like I don't like to say it this way, but like a sick person. And I don't mean that she's a sick person. What I mean is that her prayer becomes like that. Like she's no longer capable of praying as normal. So she prays any way that she's able. If she has to pray sitting down, and she just moves forward for a ruku and lowers more for the sujood, and that's all that she can do, then that's what she's required to do. Allah does not require a person to do more than what he's capable of doing.
Okay, so the ankle and above, is that also part of the woman's aura? Lots of sisters are covering with a scarf but showing their ankles and a little leg below their jeans. Does hijab of the head allow for any hairs to show at the front, as this seems to be a trend, along with showing earlobes? Are these aura for females?
Yeah. So the lower leg, the shin, is aura. According to some, like Imam Shafi'i, the feet themselves are aura, so it's no longer an issue about ankle or not. The whole of the leg down to the feet, and that's a strong opinion from Abu Hanif as well. So definitely the lower leg should be covered of a woman. And covered here also does not mean Masha, I'm getting a running commentary from Aftakhar about the score. PSG have turned it around. They're 2-1 up now. It also does not mean, covering does not mean that like she's wearing like tight jeans all the way down to her legs. Like even though she's technically covered, but that's as bad as it gets. Like wearing tight jeans but making sure she wears a hijab, a scarf. So the tightness of the clothes itself is a problem. Like the way, particularly for women, but even for men, when you look at Muslim cultures traditionally, loose clothing was the standard norm. Loose clothing for men and for women. Loose clothing was standard, and even for men, we're also wearing tight trousers. That's normal now for men, but that's not how it is. So likewise, like hair showing and the earlobe showing, no, that's not. The correct thing. Just be a bit strict and normal. What a woman's allowed to uncover is the face. That means up to the chin. So even like the neck uncovered and the area underneath her chin being uncovered, that's all the aura. And like now you got women like wearing turban hijabs and so on, like their necks uncovered. That's an issue about her prayer being valid or not. Allah. Afwan, sorry, doctor, I just want to clarify because somebody's picked up on this mistakenly. Did you say that the way to know if you've been affected by black magic is by going to the doctor? No, I didn't say that. No, I say just to tick off that as a possibility is go to the doctor just to check that you've got a medical condition. It's nothing. So that's not the doctor saying you got black magic or not. It just may be a normal condition that you assume to be black magic. Then after that, if there's no medical reason, but then something is clearly wrong, then start looking at araqi. Somebody can treat it. Wallahu a'lam.
Another ankle question.
Yeah.
In prayer, does your ankle have to be showing for males? Does a male have to show his ankle in prayer?
You know what's weird now? Leaving aside, and we may touch upon this, leaving aside like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam speaking about any part of the izar, lower garment, being beneath the ankles and it's in hellfire. The sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that the garments that he wore, the izar that he wore, it went up to halfway up his shins. So definitely that's the best way. If you're wearing like a thobe and an izar underneath, like a lungi, which is how the Prophet's nice and wore it, is that to have the lower shins uncovered. But now all men will have it down, draping down, and that's it. And Allah, it's alamat as-sa'at, sign of the Day of Judgment. Like women have got their legs uncovered, men have got their legs covered. Like the exact opposite of how it's meant to be. Wallahu a'lam. So yes, a man should have his ankles uncovered. Does it invalidate the prayer? No. If it's covered, is he sinful for covering it? No. But as a sunnah, the way the Prophet's nice and dressed is that if you're wearing a lungi or a thobe, then have the lower part of your leg uncovered. That's a sunnah. But it doesn't result in invalidating your prayer or even falling into sin. Allahu a'lam.
Right, can we eat crab sticks?
Hey, where are you looking?
Right at the bottom. Well, it's not right at the bottom anymore, but towards the bottom.
Can you eat seafood sticks which contain crab? Definitely not for the Hanafis, no. Definitely not for the Hanafis. Wallahu, I don't know the Shafi'is, because the problem with crabs is that they survive on land as well as sea. If it's sea creatures, seafood is allowed at all the madhabs except for Hanafis. Hanafis limited to fish, only fish from the sea. But crabs also survive on land, so you need to refer that to a genuine Shafi'i / Maliki / Hanbali. Genuine, real, because there's a lot of fakes online.
Is there a connection between khushu and generosity?
I don't know. Do you know anything on that? No?
No.
We don't know. Me and Dr. Kevin don't.
Okay, suicide. I've people close to me who've recently lost 2 friends to suicide. How do we console them? How do we help them to keep them guided? As they obviously, when things like that happen, you get negative thoughts. And how will Allah treat their friends after having taken their own life? This is affecting the adab with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
The first thing to help console them is just to make it clear to them that even though they've taken their own life, which is a serious matter, you should consider that they've died as believers. They've died as believers. So even the ahadith that speak about them eternally being punished in that same way in hellfire, generally is not considered to mean that they're eternally in hellfire. It just means that as long as they're being punished, then they will suffer that fate in hellfire. But then, because you want to console them, like even that discussion needs to be changed. And the friends of or your friends who've lost their own friends through suicide, just remind them that however heinous a crime a person is, however evil, wrong a crime is, there's nothing greater than the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is only refusing to forgive kufr. He's only refusing to forgive that. So even though it is something major that's taking place, but you want to get them to think more about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and don't let them start thinking that there's no chance whatsoever that their friends could be forgiven, because it's not an act of kufr. It doesn't take them out of the fold of Islam. Wallahu a'lam.
Abdullah Al-Khatib's asking whether getting forced to become a doctor by your parents is permissible.
Who's asked?
Abdullah Al-Khatib. It's a Facebook question.
Oh, is it? Let's have a look. That's brilliant.
Or should we say Dr. Abdullah Al-Khatib?
Yeah. Yeah. Paul's saying he didn't ask the mermaid question. I'm sure it was him. Allahumma salli alayhi. So, sorry, Afan, I'm not looking at that question. Let me go back to it. I'm moving around, messing me about. روضة الهادي محمد. Can I start singing now?
If you want.
Can't see it.
You can't see it?
No, if it's on Facebook, I'm looking somewhere. Are you looking at Rawdah's page?
I don't know. I don't know whose page it
And
is.
what's his question then?
He's saying, is getting forced to become a doctor by your parents permissible? I'm assuming he is asking, is it permissible for them to force you to become a doctor?
Maybe change the question. Let's change the question. Do you have to obey them? Do you have to obey them? What's the answer, Joe?
Yeah, you have to obey him. I have to say that I'm a dad now, so yeah. So obviously, I'm going to say that you have to obey in matters that are that don't go against the Sharia. You have to obey them,
even though that person has no interest whatsoever in going into medicine and going to be miserable as a doctor.
It could be more miserable choosing another profession, but there's barakah and there's in obeying the people who you are legislated to obey. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says obey your parents, and there's barakah in that. You don't know when it's going to come, you don't know how it's going to manifest, but this there'll be something in that. Serving parents, and the best way you can serve parents is by obeying them in whatever you can obey them in.
Okay, there's your answer, Brother Abdullah Khatib.
Start applying.
The rights, and I pretty much agree with Dr. Javed on that. The rights and wrongs, like whether they should do that or not, like is that the best profession and so on. That's for them. That's for them. But as a son or a daughter, even though you may dislike it, then it's definitely the better stance that you obey your parents in all things where it's possible. It's definitely the better option that you obey your parents. They're not telling you to do something that's haram. They may be telling you to do something that you don't like, but they're not telling you to do something that's haram. Allahu Akbar.
I mean, I think it's on a wider point. There's some stuff in life, right? Be it in studies or in marriage or in anything. There's stuff in life which is not pleasant that you just have to do. You have to get on with it, and you have to get over it. It's very important. Back in the days, people just took any job and they did it, and they, whether they liked it or they didn't like it, our parents, our generation, and before them, they used to have, some of them had really tough jobs, and they just went and they did it, and they provided, alhamdulillah, a comfortable life for us, and we need to start doing the same. Now we're getting choosy. It's like, well, it's not my thing, and so ideally, if they give you a choice, then fair enough. My dad was trying to get me to go into art, but I wasn't so confident. But
that's not normal for an Asian parent, is it?
Yeah, my dad's not normal. MashaAllah, may Allah bless him.
Allah.
Okay.
What I'm going to do, sorry now. we'll just quickly run through questions from the bottom upwards. So just quick answers now, just one sentence answers. Someone converts to Islam just so they can marry a Muslim woman. Is that allowed? It's allowed if that person took the Shahada. It's allowed. You can't question them as to whether they're actually Muslims or not. So how do you remove arrogance from your heart? Sit with those who are better than you. Whatever's causing you to be arrogant in wealth, then go and find people who are wealthier than you. Arrogance in your religion, go and find people who know more than you. Sit with people who are better than you. We recite Durood Sharif whilst working, but how do we recite with presence of the heart? I would believe that the Holy Prophet can our salawat. If you're doing it whilst working, just read it. Because reading a large amount, substitute for presence of mind. So just keep on reading it. And inshallah ta'ala, he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam hears. Allahumma salli alayhi. When menstruating, what can you read for the deceased? Salawat, read dhikr, read La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minadh dhalimin. Read kalima shahada. There's a lot you can read. The only thing you can't read is Quran. But there's so much other that you can do. Let's just quickly move through some others. Can we give sadaqah for a deceased person who was involved in paying interest, i.e. mortgage, as in to rectify them for their forgiveness? Yes, you can do, and you should do. La ilaha illallah. Okay,
Well, the Sharia council's taking money off from the application of divorce.
Oh,
what's the rule? I know you like Sharia councils.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh. Application of divorce. It's a long one, mate. This one's a long one, right? Just quick. I'm just going to say quickly. Maybe the next session we'll speak about it. And I know Burhan's here because Burhan's got his own view on this, and he doesn't like my view on this one. But I take the view of most of my teachers who said, or all the teachers that I've asked, who said that these councils, they're batil, they're void, they have no authority whatsoever to terminate marriages. So if you're talking about going to a council in order, and here I don't want to go too much, khula has become totally changed now. People say, women say, I'll go to the council to get a khula. Khula by definition, you go to your husband to agree to release you by paying an amount of money. That's what khula is. That's the khula in the Quran, in the Sunnah, and in the way the Imams. So these khula councils, batil, they're false. They have nothing to do with Sharia. So if that's what you're talking about, then the bigger problem is that they're terminating marriages with no valid basis whatsoever. Taking payment for that, and what they're doing is a false act. Wallahu a'lam. They have no grounds to do that whatsoever. If they we actually do this in Greensville Trust, and I do this. Marriages, a divorce has taken place, and you just want a certificate to confirm that the divorce has already taken place. Yeah, and we do actually take payment for that, and that's almost like a service fee for providing a certificate just to confirm that you're divorced. Because unfortunately, for some reason, most people seem to assume if you don't have a piece of paper, you're not divorced. It's an and then also, like, most mosques will not allow her to get married a second time without that piece of paper. So Allahu alam. So that itself, yes, but khalas, we'll finish with that today. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll have our next session in 2 weeks' time. Next week, I'm going away for a holiday to Scotland, so I'll be having fun in Scotland. Can we finish with a qasida? Burhan's put in a request, a qasida from Dr. Javed.
And maybe next time, not this time.
Do you start working on it in the meantime?
Inshallah.
Burhan, your whole life's a holiday, mate. Khalas, jazakumullah khairan, all of you attending. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll continue this in 2 weeks' time. And also, again, thanks to Dr. Javed.
Jazakumullah khair.
And inshallah, next time we'll have the same screen in the background, and we'll sing "You'll Never Walk Alone" together. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.